there's a really close relation to a 30-year fixed rate mortgage and a 10-year Treasury. So when we see that 10-year Treasury rise over the past 4 or 5 weeks here, we've seen mortgage rates parallel that. It's gone up.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Mortgage Minute. My name is Matt Thomas. I'm joined by Brian Daywald, and we have a few points that we want to go over today on Halloween. First one is the 10-year Treasury rising, new inflation fears. We're learning that the Fed may be backing off of their projections, and there's certainly a lot of political uncertainty still. We'll also be touching on housing news, September home sales in particular. Brian, you want to start with the 10-year Treasury rising?
Yeah, so, if we go back to September, I believe it was the 18th is when the Federal Reserve had their big meeting and they lowered rates a full 50 basis points or 0.5%. And what's interesting is since that's taken place, we've seen the 10-year Treasury climb, quite a bit. I don't have the stats in front of me. It's somewhere between 70 and 80, maybe 90 basis points. So, there's a really close relation to a 30-year fixed rate mortgage and a 10-year Treasury. So when we see that 10-year Treasury rise over the past 4 or 5 weeks here, we've seen mortgage rates parallel that. It's gone up.
Right. Well, I mean, basically, to put it into sort of layman's terms, if you will, or interest rates terms, we had rates that were basically near 6, and now they're basically near 7. So we had that great, what seemed like the news thought was great news. But again, as we've always talked about, those anticipated moves by the Fed are typically baked into the interest rates already. So knowing that going into September 18th, Fed meeting last month, those rates were already seeing that adjustment. And since then, as you mentioned, things have changed because of the 10-year Treasury.
Along with a lot of other data that we're going to talk about. All of this is related, by the way. Everything that we're going to talk about relates to one another in some form or fashion, particularly when it comes to mortgage rates.
Sure.
No.
Brian, there's, new inflation fears, of course. You had mentioned sort of off camera that we were talking that there's, we went from the potential of a hard landing to a soft landing to maybe no landing. You want to explain that?
Right. Yeah.
We're talking about the economy, obviously, here.
Yeah, and jobs, right? So jobs have a lot to do with, again, the 10-year Treasury, what the Federal Reserve is thinking in terms of, they're almost backing down a little bit and say, gosh, we made too big of a move because these jobs reports, right? There's a lot, the more jobs that get posted and created expand on inflation, right? The more people are out there making money, the more money is going to get spent. So, these last couple of reports that we've seen on employment data has exceeded expectations quite a bit, which is never great news for inflation or bonds or treasuries or any of these things that we're talking about. So the last report that came out for September blew expectations out of the water by quite a bit.
And it's your belief, and not only just your belief, but a belief of a lot of economy experts that that there's some things that are kind of, it's not what meets the eye in terms of what you see on the jobs report. So it looks like there's a lot of jobs and job growth. But what's going on, Brian? What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of things behind that, Matt. So there's, the private sector, meaning folks that own small companies, right? 50 and less employees. Those numbers are down quite a bit, particularly in the 1 to 25 category range. Government jobs, shocker, are up quite a bit. Overall, primary employment is down quite a bit, meaning folks that just have a regular, 9 to 5 are those numbers are down, but a lot of second and third jobs, right? Driving for Grubhub and Amazon and all of these type secondary and third jobs are going through the roof because people have to make ends meet. So unfortunately, that's the data that's being looked at is the overall picture, right? So if 500,000 people lose primary employment and 1 million people take out a second job, that looks like there's 500,000 new jobs. That's what we're fighting against right now.
Interesting. And so how is that impacting kind of what we're seeing with interest rates, would you say?
I mean, it's huge because the Fed thinks that they're going to, ease that down, right? I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I know we're going to talk about this, but the Federal Reserve is, a month or two ago said, gosh, here's our target plan, right? We're going to rate or lower this much in this amount of time and everything else. Now they've since backed off based on a couple of just recent reports post reduction meeting back in September. So it's just it's kind of a frenzy just in terms of how quickly things are moving, but it's having a huge impact, of course.
Well, and there's a lot going on this time of year, especially. We've obviously got political uncertainty with the election right around the corner. There are a couple of new major data reports that are coming out in the future here, and again another Fed meeting. So, do you want to dive into any of those topics a little bit further?
The one thing that I've seen a lot of data and news on is just the fear of a sweep, right? It doesn't matter if it's on either side of the aisle. If there's a sweep on either side, the markets don't love it, right? I don't have all the stats here with me. I'm sure we can do some Googling to figure out what that looks like. But the most recent time that there was a sweep on either side, the markets didn't like it. So they like to have a little bit of balance between presidency and Congress, et cetera. And if there is a sweep there, the economy doesn't necessarily love that.
Sure. Well, it makes sense. And not to dive into politics, but I think personally that one of the things that makes our country great is that we have, a little bit of both because we have diversity of thought. And, in that way, policies are sometimes stymied, but it keeps one thing from, things from shifting one direction or the other. And one direction, I would imagine, would be detrimental to the economy potentially, or at least the perception of how that might go. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of perception out there already that's already skewing markets, right? I saw a report just this morning where, a lot of markets are anticipating a Trump victory, and they're already moving the needle to where the presidency was decided back in 2016. Like it's very preemptive in my opinion, but we're seeing a lot of that right now.
That's interesting. Yeah. Brian, I saw in housing news that we saw September numbers. In fact, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, is reporting, and it was echoed by Reuters and other national and international publications that, September housing looked great. We saw numbers go up, and, we mentioned it at the top of the show. What did we see differently at that point? A month and a half ago, we saw interest rates that were way better than what they're at right now.
Yeah. I believe the number was about 18%. I think there was an 18% upticks in purchase loan applications for the month of September.
That's great.
So that was a good, indicative of what we were seeing with rates and home prices and everything else. So. Sure. I think from the conversations I've had with a lot of folks, I have people coming back out of the woodwork from a year or 18 months ago saying, gosh, I was anticipating a crash and it just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So a lot of folks are back at the grind looking.
Well, now with rates being up again, of course, it brings into focus, that affordability piece that we have talked about, for years and years and years on this show. It's essentially rates are higher than, we look back a year ago, they're not nearly what they were a year ago, but they literally are up a full point since a month ago. And so I think we'll see October's numbers really change, and I don't think they're going to be up. They're going to be down. There is a clear slowing in the housing market in terms of the activity. And part of that's due to political uncertainty and things. Right. There is a news publication, if you will, called Keeping Current Matters. They like to talk about, they keep us apprised of what's going on in the housing market and related to elections. What did you want to share?
Well, so it's interesting. These guys did a big report back to like the last few decades where it shows, housing activity declining between summertime and, probably the end of the year, which is great for buyers, right? Just in terms of being able to get a deal, right? A lot of folks are looking for. There's a lot less buyers out there. So there's some good deals out there for folks, meaning concessions and rate buy downs and, this kind of thing. For sellers, it's a little challenging because there aren't as many buyers out there, right? So it's a little tough to sell a house right now. On the other side of that coin, once the new year kind of rolls through, the historic data shows that, home prices really rebound nicely in the spring. Almost every presidential election cycle, except for 2008, everybody knows what happens in 2008, was a meltdown in every financial market, all the way around. So again, 2008 was the only presidential election year that post-election home prices suffered. Every other election going back a few decades, the housing prices rebound nicely.
Well, there's a man named Steve Harney, and he's actually the creator of Keeping Current Matters. He's passed, unfortunately, but he used to talk about, living in upstate New York, and when there's a large snowstorm that causes everyone to pause on their buying, somebody like McDonald's doesn't ever get sales back. You don't decide, well, I didn't buy a Big Mac today, but I'll buy one that I didn't buy today, I'll buy it tomorrow. It doesn't happen. Right. If you're Apple and you were going to go into the Apple store and buy an iPad during the snowstorm, you put that purchase off. So a home sale is very much like that. So people who are saying, this isn't my time, I don't like the rates, I don't like the political uncertainty, let's wait till the election, whatever the case is, they're waiting, but they put that off. And what we're seeing with the 6% rates that we enjoyed a month ago, if we get now, I'm not saying we're going to get back there, who knows, but if we get back in that territory at all, and also you add in the spring market, where people just tend to buy anyway. We're going to see a lot of pent up demand. A lot of people who are postponing and doing things. So if you're a buyer and these rates right now are affordable for you, you may consider finding a phenomenal deal where sellers are not desperate, but very eager and willing to sell amongst their neighbors and competition, versus when we get to the springtime, especially if rates chill out, especially if the uncertainty, if things start to shore up a little bit and we have a little bit more certainty, people feel more confident in buying, we're going to see the inventory start to disappear again. And we're going to see a lot more competition, and it happens every spring. And it may happen a little bit more so this year because potentially rates are down and because the inventory has ticked up where people will snatch up what's out there currently. So it could be an interesting spring, but if you're interested in a deal, this may be your time.
And I'm going to go way out on a limb. I think rates are going to be better in the spring than they are now. So we'll see if all of that crystal ball work actually comes together accurately. But I think we're going to see some improvements come spring and most of next year. I think I think we're in for some nice numbers.
Yeah, if you've picked up anything from watching this show over the past many years, it is that you should understand that there are no experts, even way beyond the level at which we are, that really have any idea what exactly will happen with interest rates. You definitely need a crystal ball to be able to figure that out. However, that's why we focus on the data and the facts and what's going on and just analyze, for now. But I appreciate that prediction. A month from now will be roughly Thanksgiving. It's that holiday time, so it's a fun time. But again, the perception is a lot of things just generally around the holidays slow down from a real estate standpoint. And I think besides the election numbers, you'll see that historically, this is a fairly good time. A lot of people are making moves and making purchases and selling and things like that in anticipation of the calendar year changing. And so there's typically a lot more that goes on. We'd like to see some of that rebound, hopefully next month from the election uncertainty.
Happy Halloween.
All right. Yeah. Happy Halloween. See ya.